What should they do? What do you think the answer is for the Wolverines if they lose their head coach and obviously defensive coordinator and Jesse Minter?
The obvious. Just promote Sharon Moore.
Yep.
Just especially with, I don't know if any external coaches are going to want to come out there with those sanctions possibly incoming and dive headfirst into that. I think Michigan's internally already been fighting that. Moore coached darn near half your games this season and went 6-0. I know he had the best team in college football, but you still have to get through, especially, look, he got you through the Penn State game and the Ohio State game.
Yep.
I mean, that's enough of an audition for me to go and clearly, especially we saw after the Penn State game, loves being there. I mean, he just absolutely loves being there, loves that team, would just have a fantastic base to work with, especially on defense, and he can put together the offense himself. Obviously, if they lose Minter along with Harbaugh, that's a big loss. I don't know how many guys would transfer out because of that. I don't know, who they would get to replace Minter, if it's internal or what, but just do the obvious. Do the obvious thing. I think the guy's earned it, right? And the players love him. He loves the players and the team and the culture and all that. And I don't know that they would win a national title again this year, but I think their defense and I think just keeping things the way that it's been rolling at least gives them a shot.
I agree. My question to you is, do you think so if Harbaugh doesn't immediately hire Jesse Minter, would you consider promoting Minter instead of Sharon Moore, or would you stick with Sharon Moore?
I would go with Moore.
Yeah,
I just because he's already done it, and I think, we saw them choose him this year for those 6 games to do that. I think
Minter, yeah.
I think if they were gonna have Minter as the head coach in waiting, they would have had him do the audition.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I think before last season and before the suspensions had been a thing, that's a conversation. But I think they've already made their decision.
I think Minter's
probably made that decision knowing that Harbaugh very well could have left after or could leave right now.
I think Minter. I think how I want to put this is Minter is a better coordinator, I think, than Sharon Moore. But I think Sharon Moore there's more than just being an X's and O's guy to being a head coach. And obviously you saw the interviews with Sharon Moore. I mean, people were clowning him for it after the Penn State game. I loved it. Where he's in tears. The guys love him. You got to be a leader. Jim Harbaugh's a culture guy. Sharon Moore seems like a culture guy. I think that's the move. Now, I do think Minter's a better X's and O's guy than Sharon Moore. Not to disparage Sharon Moore. He's a terrific offensive coordinator. He's a terrific offensive mind.
I think exactly what you said is the in college, especially in the NFL, you have a lot of head coaches now calling plays, but in college, there's Nick Saban pretty much talked about this when he retired. He's like, there is so much surrounding all of this that calling plays who is it? Is it who was it that just gave up? Which head coach just gave up? Didn't they just give up play calling? No, Hugh Freeze took him back.
Yeah,
that's right. Because when he got to Auburn last year, Hugh Freeze gave up play calling, and he'd always called plays because he was like, I need to focus on these other things, and now he's turning back around. So it's hard. It's hard in college. Because I remember Hugh Freeze, I think, even said at one point, he's like, it's hard to do all that and put together the whole offense. It's tough. So Moore, I don't even know that he would call the plays himself. Maybe not. But I think the fact that his leadership got them through a lot of that last year is the big selling point.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's in college especially. The NFL is a lot more about X's and O's. College, dude, you got to be a CEO. You got to be the face of the program. The biggest superstars in college football are the coaches. NFL is about the players. And college football is about the coaches. When you think about college football, the biggest stars, you think Nick Saban, you think Kirby Smart, you think of those guys. So I agree. I think Sharon Moore is kind of the leader that they would need. And you mentioned, 6-0 as interim head coach. That's a tough spot to be in, especially when you're playing Ohio State, who you've beaten twice in a row. They want to get back at you and beat you now. And you beat Penn State, too, as a top 10 team in the country as well. So Sharon Moore, I think, is the easy answer here. I think that's ultimately what they'll end up doing. I wanted to bring up Brian Kelly, though, because the LSU head coach, who a lot of people have rumored that if Harbaugh leaves, he would be interested in the job. I don't think it would make much sense for Brian Kelly specifically because, one, I think LSU is a better job than Michigan, just straight up. And two, not even considering the sanctions that are incoming for Michigan. So I think LSU, even without the sanctions taken into account, I think LSU is a slightly better job than Michigan. But especially with the sanctions that could be coming in, I definitely don't think that LSU is a worse job than Michigan. And another thing is he made so many moves this offseason to improve his defensive coaching staff. why would he leave after like that? That doesn't sound like a guy who's has one eye on the door. That sounds like, hey, I need to fix this now. He got a top 10 recruiting class this year in 2024. Right now, his 2025 recruiting class is number 1 in the country. They have the number 1 overall recruit in quarterback Bryce Underwood. They have the number 1 wide receiver and a top 5 overall recruit in DeCorian Moore, and the number 1 running back in Harlan Berry. So they got the number 1 quarterback, number 1 receiver, and number 1 running back in 2025. I don't know. I don't think it would make much sense. First of all, I don't think Michigan should do it, and I don't think Brian Kelly should even think about it either, of leaving LSU. So I wanted to bring up the Brian Kelly stuff too. For either side, I don't think it makes much sense for either of them.
I don't think it makes sense at all for Michigan. Kelly, if he was trying to just win this coming year, I could see it because LSU, they need a lot of work on their defense. Jaden Daniels and those receivers are leaving. Logan Diggs, now his second leading rusher, is also now at Ole Miss. There's this year is going to be kind of a retool for LSU. I don't think, me personally, I don't think they're a playoff contender this year. I think they went 9-3 with Daniels, Neighbors, and Thomas as the best offense in college football. That I think there's a lot more to fix right now at LSU. Long term, if he's making all his long-term moves, the recruiting classes, obviously, everybody knows LSU's defense has got to get work done. That was probably the toughest season I've seen an LSU defense have since I've been alive, to be honest with you. If he's in it for the long haul, cool, go ahead and stay. If he was just trying to win 1 year at a time and do all, I could see the reasoning. Plus, Brian Kelly's much more of like a Midwest guy, right? Getting back kind of in that environment. Like he was
that Southern accent kind of convinced me a little bit. Didn't it convince you, Brian Kelly's Southern accent?
I was fooled for a second, but you just remember certain things. I give him credit for trying, but no, I think it really doesn't make a ton of sense, especially for me, more so from Michigan's angle. I don't know why you'd want to go, because we've seen it now with the portal. And with Saban, where you're going to get a lot of guys jumping ship, man.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's going to be the same rebuild project as he has right now. So he might as well stay within the project that he's already started now and build from there with those recruiting classes you've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of gave me a face when I said Michigan is a worse job than LSU. Do you think Michigan's a better job than LSU?
I mean, why not? They just won a title. They win 10, 11 games every single year. Look, LSU, since Burrow left, what have they really done? And I know there's other things that go into it, facilities.
Yeah.
And LSU, they pull in tons of athletes, but it feels like outside of the Burrow year, they've really been kind of trying to find it over the last decade still, like as far as like competing with Alabama and competing with Georgia. And I think for the recruiting base and being in the South and what they can pull in on like talent-wise, yeah, but also clearly they haven't, other than Harold Perkins, like on defense. They're not getting the Patrick Petersons and the Derek Stingleys and these guys that they used to, who were just – we used to see LSU guys going top 10 in the draft. I always look at it from a standpoint of like the number one thing is winning, right? And I think especially right now with a 12-team playoff, that's got to be the priority. You make the playoff, and I think everything else takes care of itself. Right. It's not quite like how I think about the Texas A&M job, because LSU's competed at a way higher level than that. They have. Like even A&M had Johnny Manziel, and I don't think they won more than – did they win 10 games in either of those years?
I don't think they did. I think they got like 9. Yeah.
Like A&M, I just look at and I go, everybody's like, what's the appeal? And it's like, oh, they have money. Okay, cool. But like eventually you have to win, because all of a sudden if you're losing with a whole bunch of money like Jimbo Fisher found out, it's not very appealing all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was appealing to get fired because you get a $70 million buyout. But
right. Well, that's individually, that's the best job in the world. I would take $70 million to get fired. But I think the LSU job, I think it's hard, and especially they don't have SEC West anymore. But in the SEC, where does LSU stand right now? Are they the fifth best team, the sixth best team?
Oh, well, that's interesting, because now with Saban gone, I think there's a window there for like, I know Georgia is clearly still like the class now, but I mean, I think there's a window there for LSU to establish itself as the number 2 program. Not maybe this year, just like from a year, but like as a whole. I think there's a chance there for them to become. Now, I wanted to say too, like it's a pretty easy place to win at LSU. Michigan hadn't really been this national title contender until Harbaugh got there. And we all saw how, Harbaugh's like an NFL job. He's a terrific head coach. And everywhere he's gone, he's turned them into a really good, Stanford was terrific under Jim Harbaugh. Andrew Luck there. Went to the 49ers. All of a sudden, they went from an average team to one that was in the NFC Championship every year, made the Super Bowl. Michigan, all of a sudden, they won the national championship. LSU's last 3 coaches before Brian Kelly, Nick Saban, Les Miles, and Ed Orgeron, all 3 of them won a national championship at LSU. And we all know Ed Orgeron, we saw what happened after Joe Burrow left. He's not a great head coach. So I think it's an easier place to win. I think, obviously, the recruiting you're in Louisiana. That's a hotbed for recruiting. You consistently bring in top 5, top 10 classes every single year. I think it's an easier place to win. I'm not trying to Michigan's a terrific job. They're a top 10 job for sure. But I do think LSU's a better job because I think it's easier to win there, whereas Michigan just had a way better coach than LSU had, and obviously Brian Kelly right now. I think Jim Harbaugh was the reason they won. I don't think it was the Michigan program really too much that they won. I think it was just terrific job by Jim Harbaugh building the culture, building an unbelievable coaching staff, getting top talent there. I think LSU's a better job only because I think it's easier to win there than it is to win at Michigan, in my opinion.
That's a tight one because it's not this. There was a couple of years, even the Brady Hoke years in there, that they weren't great. But really, I think Michigan, and we said this about LSU before Burrow, where Michigan's always kind of they're kind of stacked a lot everywhere else, but at quarterback, and that makes it hard. But I think you're also talking about 2 just completely different environments and 2 different ways you have to build a team. LSU certainly is flashier, but Michigan, it's it gets in the winter, it's cold, they're playing hard-nosed, old-school, I-formation football a lot of the times. I think I don't think the talent base is that different. I think it's shifted a little bit where it's Michigan's it's Big Ten, right? It's offensive line, it's defense. It's now, an LSU used to have everything. I think LSU is flashier, but I don't know that the talent base is all that different. Other factors may play into it. It's less flashy, cold weather, but it's still, you got 2 of the best home stadiums in college football for sure. But I think the sanctions are going to be interesting too to see where that might how heavy that is and how much that really puts a dent in it as well. But I also don't think the recruiting thing is quite as it's not that it's not a big deal. It's that it shifted the focus, right, with NIL and everything. Right. It used to be, well, the teams in certain states are getting all their local kids, so they have the advantage, right? Kids can go anywhere they want now. Everybody's got cell phones. Plane tickets are easy to get, all that stuff. Now they're getting paid, so it's even easier to go home and Michigan's going down to Florida and going out to California and getting some of these kids. It's not just, we're recruiting Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania for the best kids and fighting locally. It's not like that anymore either. So I think maybe the best way I can put it, maybe you're right that LSU's a better job, but Michigan's currently, other than maybe the sanctions, in a better state. Yeah. Having come off a national title with a boatload, maybe the best defense in college football returning.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think I'm looking at the college team talent that 24/7 Sports does, which is basically how good your roster is just purely based off how these kids were recruited out of high school. So LSU this year was the 7th most talented team. Michigan was 14th. So I think Michigan, so much of that was, the coaching staff, I think, was the best coaching staff in college football. I think you got, obviously, Harbaugh, one of the top 3 coaches in the country. Sherrod Moore, one of the best OCs in the country. Jesse Minter might be the best DC in the country. So much of that was that. They had supremely talented players, but I think a lot of that was coached up. LSU just, they're able to bring it. You saw the 2025 class, man, is stupid what LSU's bringing in. The number 1 quarterback, number 1 running back, number 1 wide receiver. Michigan does not really do that. Michigan kind of has been hovering in the top 20 for recruiting. LSU's kind of outside that. Now, I do think LSU has got to do a much better job in the transfer portal. They obviously got Jaden Daniels, but other than that, they haven't really attacked it as much as I think they should be. Because I think that's another thing you have to be using now. It's recruiting is basically like the NFL draft, where you bring in these guys to the next level and you hope that they could turn out good. Transfer portal is kind of like free agency, where it's kind of all right, we got to plug holes here. If you're not using both of them, imagine an NFL team that wasn't using free agency at all. you have problems. Look at Clemson. Like, imagine if an NFL team was like, hey, we're not going to sign any free agents. We're just going to draft, and hopefully all those guys work out. Then you get into problems like Clemson has, where it's like, okay, we need to start filling these holes here. LSU's kind of in that, not as extreme as Clemson, but they're kind of in that too, where I'm like, they got to attack the portal more. So that's definitely an interesting one. I think we should do an episode this offseason, maybe like a top 10 jobs in college football, and see how we differ on that. I think that'd be pretty interesting. But yeah, I just, again, I think Sherrone Moore, just to summarize, easy answer for Michigan. He's the guy. You promote him. Brian Kelly, for me, I think neither side it makes sense. I don't think it makes sense much for Michigan. I don't think it makes sense for Brian Kelly. But I don't think Brian Kelly should be the answer there for Michigan.